amount to which trees reflect light is the albedo of the trees. With snow, that albedo is 60, 70% of light is returned to the atmosphere. With trees, it's very variable, and it's often not only just species specific, it's even condition specific. Most of the trees that live on the edges of the forest have differently coloured top and underleaf sections, so that when the wind blows against a lot of aspen or silver birch, suddenly it reflects a great deal of light. And when the wind's not blowing, the leaves drop and your albedo drops. And I often wonder why that is. Why the trees that live at the edge of forest normally change colour dramatically in the wind. And could it be that the energy they're willing to accept from light has to be less when wind blows? But one of the little guys out here, we make this drink out of the little sour berries that have this shiny underleaf. You know what they are. They're all around us here. What are those little sour berries that you see out here? Sumac. Sumac's a great little forest edge thing that has this light change all the time. So your silver birches, all your birches, and so on. And, you know, your willows white and aspens quiver, you know. Aspen's always playing with the light. What are they doing? It's all energy transaction. So the albedo, the amount of light reflected by the tree, varies from about 7 to 40%. Although you can give a characteristic albedo for a tree, in a sense, if you've got an indicator in your camera, you can give it in foot candles, however it's calibrated. It may change in different wind conditions with certain speed. It doesn't change much for this sort of tree. It's pretty constant. Now, also the wavelengths emitted by the tree, the amount of red light emitted by the tree is very variable. So these dark trees, they're heaters, they're radiators. They absorb the wavelengths of heat and they re-radiate. So if you want a radiant heater, and you do where you have long winter nights, you surround your house with dark trees. On the other hand, if you want reflected light for early spring, you use shiny trees. And you can get about a 5-week start on your gardens, you know, out in front of of the aspens and the silver birches. And you'll see the insects hatch out there first. You'll see the little animals come out of hibernation out there. Only goes about the height of the tree out in front of the trees. But there is a powerful ground heating effect from silver edges. And if you get some of the yellow bamboos and trim the sun side of them, you get a very strong reflection on your house. So if you want daytime heat or heat the ground up, reflection's good. If you want the radiant heat, which is fairly constant day and night, then you need to have dark trees. Try experimentally on a cold night, a still night, to walk uphill towards a clump of very dark trees. What you'll meet is a warm downdraft, and it's very sensible that as you feel it, you know, you advance as though towards revelation into the warmth uphill. Everything, cold air is draining down the hill. It's chilly as down the valley, but walk uphill towards a clump of dark trees and the air is warm. What's happening is the cold air is pushing warm air out of the clump all night. So you can use all these effects, and all this is due to those wavelengths either absorbed and retained or reflected and rejected by trees, as is their colour. The colour of the tree indicates which wavelengths it in fact is rejecting. And as the colours vary so widely, if you want a really cool your house down, put red-coloured vines over it. It's cold under there. You know, an apple got reds and green sides, some apples. Put a thermometer under each side and look at the huge temperature difference between the red side of the apple and the green side of the apple. Or if you want to run a little battery, you can put 2 terminals in there and get a thermoelectric effect. You get about 1.5 volts. Takes you 4 apples or 6 lemons to get a 6-volt battery going. Yeah, you can carry it. One thing about a lemon, it's on the tree for months, so it just pumps out the electricity for months and months. Pig shit's more portable. You get 1.5 volts per bucket of pig shit. You put a zinc square on one side and copper in the other. I've got friends run their houses on buckets, 4 buckets of pig shit.
What? 4 buckets?
Pig shit. Dampened to a sort of stiff porridge, really, so slightly less and more of a gruel, sort of a gruel consistency. So, like, there are temperature differences here. There are thermoelectric effects here. That alone will cause, you know, certain ionic. And what are the ions released by trees? They're negative ions. You don't have to buy one of those little things on your desk and puff out this stuff. You can go and sit under the trees. Waterfalls, trees, and these little things you buy for your desk when you're executive all give you negative ions, right? Which offset the effects of smoking. Yeah, but not enough. We know, we're fellow sufferers. Right. So, okay, so there is an albedo, and frankly, I don't know anybody who's really dealt properly with the heat characteristics of trees. But generally speaking, the forests are that few degrees warmer and few degrees cooler. They're more buffered than the outside air. Then some light is transmitted, and the other thing in trees is there's an awful lot of reflected, redirected light, and there are trees in the forest whose sole job it is to scatter the light. And some of the forests we live in, the tropical rainforest, some of our palms are purely light scatterers. You've got to put them there, or else nothing else gets light right down in the forest. And you can sit there and all these little mirrors are scattering light through the understory. It seems to be the function of those trees. They're waxy-leaved palms. Yeah. We don't know too much about light in forests. Other forests are as black as midnight below. That is, at midday, there is no measurable light in some forests. The densest forests are not the tropical rainforests, they're the temperate rainforests. And they're as dark as pitch. You can't see your feet. Therefore, nobody knows how to do their shoelaces up. There's nothing down there but leeches and darkness and rot. 3 days under a Chilean forest, and your clothes become one massive fungal hyphae. 6 days and your boots drop off. You're not worried about your shoelaces anymore. 7 or 8 days you wrinkle up like you've been in the bath forever, and you start to get fungal hyphae growing on your skin. I live in an island like that. I mean, I figure I've served 60 years hard living in Tasmania. It's really nice to be out here, you know, out in the light. Right. So, but that light that is transmitted is red light and particularly useful to the growth of fungi, utilised by the fungi in the forest floor. It's very strange. Sometimes you'll sit down at night and you'll make a plant assembly for a particular purpose. I did it very recently. It took me about 6 weeks. I went through all the eucalyptus, selected all the eucalyptus that would grow on my farm, that would be good for honey, ordered them from the nursery, went out, planted them all along a bank, and I found they were all there. God beats you to it. Sometimes you think God isn't a bad designer. Sometimes you go out and you think he's a rotten designer, or she, or it. I saw God once. I showed it to you, didn't I, Betsy? Did I show you, Betsy? Did I show you God? Remember, he was under the bow of a boat at Miami there. He's transparent, about that round, and he was floating on the water, and he was beating out these waves at exactly the periodicity of the sidereal pulse. And his little waves he was beating out went right across the marina. And I thought, that's God. Somebody's sending these waves through the universe at that periodicity, and I found him. And I photographed him, but he had no features much. He's that far across and looked exactly like a bit of jelly. He didn't have a halo that I could see, but the whole marina had a halo. Do you remember the day I found God, Betsy? No. Well, it's the only time I lost God again the next day. That's okay. No, I'm going soft on you. I'll never go soft on you. Okay, so it's doing all the same clever things with light that it is doing with rain and wind. What else is coming in the forest? Not much, is it? Most of the energies are there. Air, light, moisture is carried in two ways, and fire. And fire does different things in different forests. You can basically break forests into two sorts. One type of forest you can call fire-loving or fire-dependent. The word is pyrophilous. Without fire, it's dead. That's all the chaparral and the maquis. Yeah, pardon?
Lodgepole pine.
Lodgepole pines. All these plants existed before man, and they existed on ironstone ridges where frequent lightning strikes occurred. So all the pyrophilous plants were in the original forest before we put our little five-toed feet on the continents, before we stood up on them, that is, before we could strike flint to flint. All these pyrophilous trees existed, but they were confined to little ridges of frequent lightning strikes through the major non-pyrophilous forests that covered most continents. Our problem was that when we did put our little foots on some continents, there wasn't any room between where the last wave broke and the first tree came out of the ground. And if you go to places upon which we have not put our foot for several thousand years, you'll find the trees hang over the sea, and up in the trees there's the masts of boats, the masts of ships, rigging, rotten ropes hanging down, ratlins, cross trees, up in the tree forest above your head. So there's no space for mankind on this earth between the sea and the forest, normally. So when we came ashore and we had nowhere to pitch our tents, what did we do? We struck flint to flint and we lit a fire and we burnt the shit out of the continent. We have burnt Australia for 150,000 years. 150,000 years ago, we started to burn it every year. How do we know that? We got old corals out on the barrier reef, and whatever falls on the sea is built into the coral. And 150,000 years ago, 151,000 years ago, somebody started to burn Australia. And if you bore through the corals, you'll find an annual layer of charcoal. Or if you bore in the lake valves of Lake George near Canberra or Darwin Crater in Tasmania, you find precisely the same calendar. At that time, someone started to burn the continent, and they destroyed all but the pyrophilous trees. And by 40,000 years of burning, they had created new species of eucalyptus, new species of acacias, new species of banksias. Mankind, by constant use of fire, had created new species of trees and had wiped out 93% of the megafauna. They got rid of the gigantic pythons, the huge lizards, the huge marsupial rhinoceri, all gone. The giant kangaroos, all finished, all gone up in flames. And most of the original flora. So we've been busy striking match to matchbox, throwing wax matches around off our horses, yeah, for 150,000 years.
I would think this would be a natural...
Mind you, it took man a long time to get here after that. We didn't discover America until about 30,000 years ago. Yeah, mankind arose in Australia, you all know that. Yeah, had to keep waiting for the interglacials to get over to Indonesia and then up to India. And well, by the way, they still speak the same language as the Aborigines. The Tamils have 40 words in common. We carried the rainbow snake with us all the way, as you know. And gradually we struggled up through China and got across to Alaska. Came back a couple of times, it was too cold. And then we drifted down here about 30,000 years ago. Don't let them kid you, mankind arose in Africa. Homo sapiens certainly did not arise in Africa. Homo erectus only doubtfully arose in Africa. Afarensis certainly did. Yeah.
So what's the play of light you use
I got what?
in this fire sequence that you're talking
All right. So there are forests which have to be fired to persist. That is, the seeds will not germinate, the forest will not persist, will not reproduce itself. All those forests, all pyrophilous vegetation with a short fire frequency, that is less than 40-year regular firing. If you take a slice of an old log in those forests, you'll see the fire frequency. All those forests are leaking, that is, they're running downhill. So sometimes a whole continent, like the continent of Australia, is leaking. The nutrient level is running down. There are less biomass every year and less essential nutrients every year. Down it goes. Going to be brutal. Mankind was never a conservationist. There are no marvellous histories of mankind. We always destroyed more than we built. Sometimes, in some continents, we destroyed most of everything we found. Now, what the white people have done to Australia is practically minute in the time they've been there. It's good, you know, they've destroyed a lot. But they haven't done the job the Aborigines did. The whole continent is badly leaking. And unless we can stop fire, unless we can push the pyrophilous vegetation back up on the ridges, then, you know, the whole thing will run down anyhow, right? Fire removes roughly 40 years accumulated nutrients each fire. All the sulphur and all the nitrogen goes to air. A lot of the terpenes, which are probably some of the more dangerous atmospheric gases. And, you know, we have to stop burning. We have to stop burning straw in Germany. We have to stop burning the marquee. And we have to start to replace pyrophilous vegetation with non-pyrophilous vegetation, really just to keep the systems as they are now, right? Now, to do that, we will lose a lot of ancient pyrophilous systems. So maybe we should keep an acre or two of them and burn them every year just to show people what it was like. But why should we burn the continent or chain down all the trees? or get rid of the grease woods. Every time you destroy biomass, you set the clock back. And if you keep on setting the clock back, then the whole system leaks away.
But isn't it true that the Permaculture fulfill a function by being on the ridge? They catch the lightning at the high point and poof, they go, and that's the end of the fire.
Yep.
In the non-fire level.
Yeah, that's what they were there for. They belong on the lightning-struck ridges and bluffs. And on some bluffs along the Columbia, for reasons unknown to me, every tree is lightning-scarred. You know, it's always going to burn there. Yeah, that's where they belong. That's where I think, you know, you can leave them. But they don't belong in the valleys. They don't belong on the north side of some of the ridges. You know, Permaculture vegetation has spread way beyond its normal natural extent, because we had to find room. And to some extent, some of us, and I would say the Aborigines today, which have the word waru, which is very like the ancient Sanskrit concept of Atman. That is, waru is fire, waru is the shrubs that follow fire, and waru are the animals that eat those shrubs. So you have a single word for a whole sequential system. Sort of words we don't have in English language. And Atman in Sanskrit, the being, is that clump of trees that belong together, you know, one being, and their associated birds and so on. So many of us became fire followers, fire lovers ourselves. And we developed an ecology of fire. We eat the shrubs that follow the fire, we eat the animals that eat the shrubs, and so on. So we proliferated fire, and then we ate smaller and smaller animals because we didn't leave anything much alive that weighed more than 100 pounds. Fortunately, mankind got here maybe 100,000 years after they evolved. So you had a lot more of the megafauna left here, not the mammoths, not the shovel-nosed elephants, not the other large, not your horses, all those things, and the large buffalo and the giant beavers. They'd all been chomped on by somebody. But you had a lot of megafauna left in the and the African continent had so much megafauna left it couldn't have been the origin of man. Couldn't have been. If you go to the most impoverished continent, Australia, it's very likely the first man, sapiens, probably evolved there. You're all Australian. You should all actually get land rights. Yeah, we're all Aborigines, yeah. I love it. There are a lot of romantics about, you know. You want to be too romantic about us, we're not too romantic.
I think that the people in Northern Europe lived in a silver culture that treated fire so much.
Of course you did.
The trees fell by flower rather than by fire.
They were like gods and goddesses.
Well, I'm not going to go that far, but I mean, aren't there...
Who was the goddess of fire in Northern Europe? They only had 3 bloody goddesses, and one was a goddess of fire, wasn't she? Yeah, they loved their bloody fires. They're always burning something. You know, the oldest building's got 20 chimneys, for God's sake, you know. You guys burnt your way right through Europe. You weren't any smarter than Aborigines.
Well, Europe was covered in forest.
Yeah, it was. And so was Israel 2,000 years ago. Dense forest. You know, it's all these bloody candles, they're lighting to things all the time in Israel. Yeah. Always getting away on you. Old kerosene lamp wasn't too good either. Yeah. the concentration has been a lot more on other things than on the environment. The preoccupations of mankind for a long time have not been that of looking realistically at their environment. Franklin Roosevelt has a weird exception.
Is the Melaleuca considered a palapa species?
Burns like a tar barrel. Yeah, yeah, like an olive tree. Virgil said, "He who would grow the grape must first plant the elder," wasn't it? What was it? No, it wasn't. It was sycamore, because he said, when fire comes, the grape on the sycamore will survive, but the fire on the olive tree will be destroyed. The grape on the olive tree will be destroyed. So if you look back, a preoccupation of people since Alexander in Greece has been the way the European civilization along that coastline has really been leaking away. Right across Macedonia, Alexander rode through huge forests, and there were huge pythons, only some of which still exist, true forest pythons. And there were temples in the forest with pythonesses, goddesses. You had religious prostitution. That was a cheery affair. I thought a big improvement on the present state of things. And you know, and various writers, you know, Virgil, everybody say, you know, look at what we're doing. The bones of the country are starting to show through the forest. And now all you got is the bone. There's only bones. You can't, you go to Macedonia and stand there, you can't believe what it was like. You go to the south end of the Caspian, you see 20 donkeys dragging a log out of the sand dunes. You can't believe that those sand dunes were huge forests. But you can if you go to the southeast corner of Brazilian forests, which are now white sands and were rainforest 40 years ago, and are now just massive silver dunes, almost pure silica. You can turn the Brazilian Amazon into a dune, sand dune. You won't like the effect, but you can do it. You are doing it. Yeah, and who's doing that? That little five-toed primate running around upright, arguing about their belief systems.
Well, now it's clear we don't have to argue anymore. We all believe in fire.
We do? Speak for yourself. I got rid of my dog and my cat, and I restricted fire to the end of my cigarette, which is very reasonable, actually. Oh, it's got to go? Oh, shit. After you've stopped driving your car and burning, I'll put out my cigarette. When you guys go rid of the car, let me know. I'll stop smoking. Okay. I know you're putting your heart where your mouth is.
How do you feel about the controversy in the National Forest here about controlling fire?
Yeah, see, they had a terrible internal debate, I suppose.
Yeah.
What they're saying is, do we retain large areas of lodgepole pine, or do we start the process of building a non-burning forest? And they came down, I think, in the national parks on the side, let natural fires rage.
Yeah.
But they would not have raged like that pre-man.
Well, no, the problem was they...
And a lot of the things that people are calling native trees are nothing to do with bloody native trees. They're species created by our active interference in the environment. And people who want to preserve, say, the desert around Tucson, which they do with their saguaro cactus, are too late. If they don't replant the forest through the saguaro will be gone within the next 15, 20 years. It's leaking. That was not saguaro cactus. 40 years ago, no, about 1930s, that was dense forests along the river, the huge cottonwoods, big forests of cottonwood, permanent streams. What does the name Sonora come from? the sonorous sound of the many rivers rushing through the land. What was the main food of the Pima Indian? Gigantic fish. All those desert Indians lived mainly on fish, their grandfather. Where was the biggest centre for beaver pelts? Tucson. Where was the last giant beaver caught? Tucson. And beyond these huge cottonwood riparian woodlands was a very dense forest up over the hills, up over Tucson and the other hills. And sticking out of the forest were the tips of the saguaro cactus. If you want to see it as it ought to be, hurry up and go down to the bottom of the Sonora Desert in Mexico, and they're still there sticking out of the forest. They are forest trees. Out in the desert, they will die. And they are dying. But everybody wants to preserve the bloody desert with a bloody saguaro in it, you know. They've got to be out there planting trees like mad so they can keep the saguaro, but you couldn't see them then, that's the trouble. We'd like to see them, you know. No, they'll be gone. They're going now. So we like to keep things in the degraded state in which we grew up. It's true, we like children. You know how if you move the furniture, children start crying because you've upset the natural order of global events. Right. So we're like that. You can take a degraded landscape like all of Wales, much of Europe, heavily forested landscapes within historic record time, and people protest if you want to put trees in there. No, this is a desert. You can't plant trees here. They're like that around Tucson. They're like that in many places.
They want to plant trees in the rain, but they don't live there anyways, cactus and grass and
Right. So we have a big educational job on our hands. Right. Now, okay, so fire will change the nature of original forest irretrievably to fire-dependent systems. It will remove most of the moisture out of the total landscape, particularly gets rid of the swamps very quickly. So most of the megafauna go with the swamps. Fire is really about 93% of it is due to us. The 3 or 4% is due to lightning. The rest of it's, you know, something else. I don't know what. Maybe it could be skunk cabbage overheating in the spring. Okay. So there are other causes of fire, but very rare. Most fire is caused by us chickens here lighting a fire. There are very few other causes of fire. Interestingly, I don't have a firm record of a fire lit by a cigarette butt. Neither does the Fire Brigades of Australia. We can't firmly place a cigarette butt as the cause of a fire. Stop hitting us with a false club. We aren't going to set fire to anything, are we? Except our mattresses. Yeah, mattresses. Yeah, in which the smoker dies in that fire. So be content. Well, you know, you should keep your eye out for energy transactions between, you know, any information. Most of the percentages I'm giving you here are real averages. And it's only with albedo perhaps that I say 7 to 40% because you can't say the albedo of a forest. None of that do we use. These are all information systems which you can use. You can put your dark trees for radiation, your light trees for reflection. You get a phenomenally good effect out of that. Very few very good books on any of this. There's an excellent book called The Climate Near the Ground by a bloke called Geiger. was a German forester. He talks a lot about the climate of forest clearing. And he also talks about the value of the front of the forest for your nurseries and seedlings and so on. Geiger, G-E-I-G-E-R, the climate near the ground. But those books are like rocking horse shit. You don't find a lot of it. This brings us to another point. What is the boundary of a tree? If this is, for instance, an oak tree, can it exist on its own? What if we sterilise the soil and plant an acorn and stick it out in sterile soil? Will we ever get an oak? We don't. It dies about the second year. Oaks can't exist without a whole crew of fungi and bacteria in the soils. So oaks have obligatory associates here, which are specific to the oak. The rhizomes need all sorts of fungi. And so fungi, they're actually trading with the soil for the minerals. And the only reason the tree is making sugars are to feed the fungi. The sugars are being paid to the fungi for the minerals they're mining from the tree. So the whole of the roots are sheathed with fungi. Some fungi are inside the roots, and some are busy, as you know, they're the main life forms that break down cellulose. Bacteria can't deal with it, blunts their teeth. But fungi can. Fungi can break down cellulose, and it has the right enzymes for that. Amylases and like enzymes. So the oak can't exist without the fungi, and the fungi vastly increase the root area of the oak, but a large tree will have 5 acres of roots and probably another 15 acres of fungal hyphae. There are about 6 miles of fungal hyphae per square yard of surface area under the forest. So the fungi vastly extend the network that is the tree. The tree can't exist without fungi, nor, of course, the fungi without the tree. The tree can't move, so it's got to think. And our trees think very well, and we still deal with our oak, and it puts out its acorn, and it makes it attractive to birds, like woodpeckers, who take them away and hammer them into holes, and jays, fortunately, who sort of bury them and stick them in hiding places. But a jay is not a perfect relocation animal. It can't remember every acorn. So although you sit pushing a lot of acorns in the ground, it doesn't always get all of them back, because quite often something will kill the jay and nobody else can remember where it hit its bloody acorn. So the acorns are actually transported out into new areas, and that's nice for it, and it grows up. And it will die in 2 years unless it gets the right fungus. So how does a fungi get there? It has to be eaten. It throws up fruit, which have to be eaten by something like a grey squirrel. And the grey squirrel, having eaten the fungus, activates the fungal spores. And it scampers to the new little trees, nips a few leaves off, and craps on the roots. And it re-inoculates the new oak trees. Without the grey squirrel, you can't get inoculation of the fungal spores. You can't even get activation of the fungal spores. They have to go through, in our case, wallaby, potteroo. The tree fungi have to be processed through mammals. So, right, here is the grey squirrel out here, doing its thing, Here's the bluebird doing its thing. Here's your woodpecker doing its thing, stuffing acorns into its little pockets up trees. And there are a whole host of insects associated with oak trees. And the tree, really, none of those things can exist without the other. The thing that is the tree has vast ramifications. You really can't put a border on it. Does it end where the bluebirds end? Does it end where the grey squirrel end? You know, why aren't the animals essentially as much a part of the forest as the fungi? What do you see as a difference between the vegetable and the animal world? Why are you calling yourself vegetarians when you're out there crunching up living embryos of little plants in your teeth? Alive. I can't believe that people crack walnuts and chomp them up without killing them first. There is no difference between the animal and the plant world at any level we look at it. They're all part of a single system. It's just some parts are detached. They all have umbilica. They're detached to be messengers. Animals are the messengers of the forest. And who's thinking the best? Let's get it down. Who's putting in the most energy for the least result? Trees are a lot smarter than animals. If they're that clever, they are immensely clever. How do you think roses got all around the bloody world? Did the rose work? No. They put out a nice scent and a nice colour. Found an ape that liked scent and colour, and it snipped bits off, and it took it everywhere. Our garden plants, half of them at least, maybe more, exist only because they appeal to us. That's very smart. You know, if you look at really who is the most intelligent, say between us and a chicken, chicken beats us hands down. We're out there ploughing Texas, sowing wheat, reaping, finding all the steel and the oil to do that. We take off the wheat, we put it on trucks, stick it in silos, bag it, take a bit out, take it out of the packet, and feed it to the chicken. The chicken didn't work for that wheat. We worked for the chicken. Roughly 70% of agriculture is working for the bloody chicken. Who's smart, the farmer or the chicken? The chicken. The chicken is winning. If you can't outthink a chicken, and so far there's no sign we have, you certainly can't outthink a tree. Who's a smart living thing on this earth? I believe the trees. I believe the trees are thinking better than we're thinking. And you go around crushing the little embryos between your teeth. I can't believe you do that. Inevitably, too, you and all of we animals will be eaten by trees. And many of the trees out there are actively hunting and killing animals now. Not only that, they're snaring them and strangling them. And as we speak, every second, 1,000 million animals are being strangled by trees in little 3-cell loops, all happening in the dark under the ground. Some little nematode goes wiggling through an innocent bit of soil. What? They are strangled and eaten by the tree. We all know trees are carnivorous scavengers. That's why I don't eat plants. I don't like eating scavengers like that. Or meat-eating scavengers, those plants. They eat all the rotten meat there is on the ground the vultures leave. And they eat you in the end. Plants eat you. The reason why I don't eat plants is that I prefer eating non-scavengers like animals. Yeah, that's why I don't eat plants. Besides, you know, what's this thing? I didn't claw my way up the food chain to eat lettuces. You see, I have no bias here. I think you should eat the most unintelligent things around you that have the least feeling. Cows, rabbits, deer, all that sort of thing. If you want to eat something really close to your own genetic structure, eat mushrooms. They are closest relatives of man out there in the forest. Much closer to you than squirrels. You know, practically, mushroom eaters are practically cannibals. Right. Genetically, they're very close to you. You share an awful lot with mushrooms. You probably are a particular advanced sort of a mushroom. I like what Fukuoka said. What in the hell's all this discrimination about? Don't discriminate. Just get out. If you can chomp it, chomp it. In season, chomp it. Right. So it's very hard to put a boundary on a tree, on its life and its necessities, and it may permeate the entire forest. The other thing that certainly happens is it's continuously sending message to its own species. It can encode chemicals and tell all the species like it that there are beetle attacks going on, and which sort of beetle and what sort of chemicals the other trees need to put out. And they respond before the beetle gets there. The other thing is, if you browse a black, what are those little nitrogen fixing straight trees we make firewood of in the northeast? Alder. If you browse a black alder, it stops putting out juicy fruits and starts putting out steroids. And then you eat the little alders and it sterilizes you. These trees are constantly adjusting your chemistry. Why do you think the snowshoe rabbit collapses every so often? The alders have sterilized the whole population. It's not just weightlifters that are sterile. It's sometimes snowshoe rabbit. As soon as the drought breaks on this range, for 6 to 12 weeks, these plants are full of steroids, cyanides, all sorts of alkaloids, and they'll kill cattle. They'll sterilize them. They'll put out zearalenone. They'll put out lots of gear. These plants are not just in passive interaction. They're not just sitting there waiting for us to chomp on them. They're actively attacking us. It's constant chemical warfare out there. They're not just standing there being innocent. They're thinking about the next move. Retaliation.
Why did it be sterilizing?
Yeah, we started to, gave us satisfaction to watch them sizzling in the hot fire, tying them to the stake. Remember, it wasn't just people, there was the stake we burned as well. Okay, so messages are being sent, specific messages, causes a change in the direction of energy available to the plant to create quite specific chemicals to offset the problem. And the message must therefore be very specific. Between species, we're not sure about the messages, but we think there's root communication. We haven't done much on this. We know very little about what's going on down here. But certainly there's a huge amount of intimate connection down here. Oh, we know one thing. Some plants, through their root associates, are pumping some nutrients into other plants. And that's why guilds occur. Yeah. So some plants are actively helping other plants. On the other hand, some plants are actively poisoning other plants. So all sorts of interactions are occurring. Some of the desert plants you've seen stand alone, nothing grows within 6 weeks. They have a zone of death around them. And they are actually killing any other plant that comes close to them. Some plants are self-spacing. You can't get two Shoshone rice grasses to grow 18 inches apart, you've got to put them 1.5 meters apart, or they just one kills the other. And so on it goes. So some plants space themselves, some plants keep all other plants away. Some plants have to have other plants to love them of a different species, and some plants are active trade and exchange. Really a complex situation. So the forest is more than the tree, and the tree really is more than the tree. The tree permeates and has messages and receiving information from most of the energy fluxes and affecting them towards its ends. The tree is always building its environment. Lucky for us, we like that environment. But it's purely a selfish action on the part of the tree. It's as smart as a whip. It can wait. It can wait. It figures, most oak trees figures, with the doubling time of age, it'll win in the end. Right. Oak trees don't get age. I know that because I was sitting in Micronesia once and all the Micronesians had gone somewhere. Why that is because Micronesia is very strategic. It gets aid from the Japanese, the Americans, the Finns, the Chinese. So every Micronesian has to be an aid worker. There's only 40,000 of them, and so many people give them aid, they're all employed administering the aid. And I was in Micronesia at a critical time when there was a women's nutrition meeting in Chuuk, so all the women left one day, and there was a men's meeting down in Fiji, so all the men left the next day, and I was alone in Micronesia. And at that time, I was the only occupant of Micronesia, and at that time, the social welfare people had all gone, and I was sitting in the boss's office because it had the biggest desk, and I was grumping away on something there writing, and a cyclone was coming in, 2 cyclones. So the last plane landed, and then a cyclone came in, and then nothing for weeks, just me and the cyclone. But off the plane, there was a little knock on the door, and I said, "Come in." And this lady, this vision, pushes its way into my office. She said, "Is this the office of the Director of Social Services?" I said, "You're in the right place." I did not add, "But I'm not him." I wanted company. She was very smart. She had lots of Chanel No. 5 or Oscar de la Renta or something on. She carried a little leather handbag. She was like from top to toe. She was very Parisian. She'd just come from Paris. And she sat down on the chair, like Parisians do, and looked at me intensely and intelligently. And I said, "Surely you don't come from Paris?" She said, "No, I come from Singapore." I said, "But where did your daddy come from?" She said, "India." I said, "You're quite an international personality, really." So I said, "And why are you here to see we people of Micronesia?" And she said, "I have come to bring you this." And out of a handbag, she took a little canvas roll, and it said, "Next Sunday is AIDS Prevention Day. Happy birthday, United Nations." Sort of stupid like that. She said, "Next Sunday is AIDS Awareness Day." "Oh," I said, "that's interesting." She said, "Can you tie this across the street?" We only had one street in Micronesia. It only runs 4 miles. I said, "We think we can arrange that." "Yeah, I think the office is capable of fixing that up for you." I did it myself. And she said, "Well, I must go. I'm catching a plane out." I said, "No, you're not." She said, "What do you mean I'm not?" I think she was thinking of the fact that the local cafe only has spam sushi. Spam sushi. I mean, that's the sort of level of food in Micronesia. It's either that or their little stringy, sticky guts out of the sea slugs, which are nicer than spam sushi. And she said, "Why aren't I leaving?" I said, because the bloody airport's closed down for weeks and all the planes have left for Japan and Hawaii and ain't no one going to be able to get in here to help us. She said, oh. And I said, but before you go and find yourself a hotel with a high class of spam sushi, I said, before you go, can I ask you a couple of questions? And here we get to the nub of the matter. She said, by all means, you can ask any questions you like. Good, I said. First of all, I want to know, can we catch AIDS from having intercourse with giant clams? And she said, and she picked up a handbag and said, nobody has ever asked me that question before, she said. I have to think about it. She said, no, I don't think you can. I said, one last question. Coconuts? She said, no, you can't catch AIDS from coconuts. I said, really, I think you don't have to worry about us here in Micronesia. And away she went. I would like to see her report. I wondered why she didn't post us that banner with a little note, please tie this across the street. She just wanted a trip to sample the spam sushi she did. So let me tell you, when you are safe having sexual intercourse with plants. Otherwise, the oak trees are going to win. And you're gone. One thing, you never should have intercourse with people. You can catch AIDS that way. So she told me anyhow. So you see, her visit has borne a lot of fruit. I am very aware of AIDS. I said to her, why do you think I'm sitting here with my legs crossed? And you know, then she and I were the only people in Coror for a couple of weeks, see, and we'd pass each other and she'd sort of cross the street and walk around me, you know. Because she knew I wasn't interested in women. Giant clams, yes. Coconuts, yes. Women, no. Okay. You may leave for lunch and I hope you don't chuck up all over the table.